Hello, this is Sauce, and I will be discussing borderline Hall of Fame basketball players today. Some of these guys are kind of like exiting their primes. Some are recently retired, and some are on their last legs. And those guys really don't have anything left to add. So I'll be going off of what those guys have accomplished in their careers. I will start off with John Wall. John Wall is a five-time All Star, uh, one-time All NBA third team. Uh, he won a couple playoff series in his career, but he never made a conference finals. He was a very good defender. He had one defensive second team. Uh, John Wall would probably have made the Hall of Fame if he had won a little bit more and uh, injuries ruined his career. If he could have gave you two or three more All Star, even superstar seasons, we'd probably be having a different discussion because he could score the ball, give you 20 a game, he could give you 10 assists. He could lock you down. In his prime, probably a top 15 player, but his resume just does not stack up and is not Hall of Fame worthy. Uh, Next up is LaMarcus Aldridge. Uh, Very, very underrated player from the late 2000s and the 2010s. Aldridge was a seven-time All-Star, two-time All-NBA second team, three-time All-NBA third team. He scored over 20,000 points, and almost everyone who has 20,000 is in the Hall of Fame. And he did not win that much, but he did have one conference finals appearance with the Spurs. Aldridge, in my opinion, is really on the fence. He's as close as it gets. Seven-time All-Star, but I never looked at Aldridge as a superstar. You could say he was more than an All-Star, but not a superstar. You could say borderline superstar, but he was never a top 10 player in my opinion. He was always top 15, top 20, top 25. So I don't know if his peak is enough to get him in, but you got the longevity, you've got the counting stats, the 20,000 points. He made the playoffs multiple times, made a conference finals. I'm gonna say Aldridge does not get in, but it does not get any closer than him. Next up is Kevin Love. Kevin Love, a five-time All-Star, two-time All-NBA second team, a one-time champion, uh, went to four finals alongside LeBron. Only played in three because he was hurt in 15, and four conference finals as well, all with LeBron in Cleveland. From an All Star game standpoint and even All NBA, it doesn't really jump out at you. But he was very dominant for 2 or 3 years in Minnesota. Was consistent with LeBron in Cleveland. Got the championship, and he played a major role, being the third best player on the team. He gave you, if it's correct, 15 and 11. He got the stop on Curry in Game 7. Due to the championship and how he had to adapt his play style, I would say Kevin Love is a Hall of Famer. Next up is Kyle Lowry. Lowry is a six-time All-Star, one-time All-NBA third team, one-time champion, and he's been to three conference finals. So, Lowry, above average scorer, above average facilitator, good defender, good leader, high basketball IQ. He does lack consistency and athleticism. And I believe in his prime, somebody like John Wall was better than a Kyle Lowry, but due to Lowry's longevity and the ability to be a leader on a championship team, I think Kyle Lowry gets into the Hall of Fame with that championship alongside Kevin Love. Next up is a retired player, Joe Johnson. So Joe was a 7-time All-Star, 1-time NBA third team. He's got over 20,000 points, which, like I said for LaMarcus Aldridge, almost everyone who reaches that milestone gets in. Joe Johnson went to 2 conference finals, but he was not a top 2 player or even top 3 on either of those teams, because in Phoenix there were 3 or 4 guys better than him, and then we went with the Rockets. He was coming off the bench at that point, was not doing very much. He had a lot of first round playoff series wins as the best player, but could never really get over the hump. ISO Joe's one of those guys. Yeah, he's got 7 All-Star appearances, but no one would ever say he was a superstar or even really a borderline superstar. He was a perennial All-Star. You can make a case he was never even a top 15 NBA player. I always looked at ISO Joe as top 20, top 25. And he was also a weaker Eastern Conference, making a lot of these All-Star teams. So Joe could get in, but for me, it's going to be a no, because I feel like LaMarcus Aldridge has a better resume than him, and I did not put Aldridge in, so ISO Joe is on the outside looking in. Next up is Al Horford. Horford's a 5-time All-Star, 1-time All-NBA player. Made the NBA Finals once last year with Boston. 4-time conference finalist. That's pretty impressive, and pretty sure he's lost to LeBron like 6 times in the playoffs or something. So he's had some bad luck running into the king. But imagine if he had beat LeBron one of these times, what his resume would look like. And he's got a 1-time defensive second team. So Horford's one of those guys who's not the most athletic, but he's above average at every single part of the game, while being a leader and having very high basketball IQ. If Al Horford would have beat Golden State last year in the finals, I would say he is a Hall of Famer. But he lost, and he was relatively quiet in the second half of that series. So for me right now, it's a no. But if he could string together another very good playoffs and get a chip with Boston, he could get into the Hall of Fame. Next up is Andre Iguodala. Iguodala is a 1-time All-Star, 1-time Final MVP, 1-time defensive first team, 1-time defensive second team, 4-time champion, 7-time finalist, 7-time conference finalist. Okay, so some of those team accolades may be a little, misleading. He was a key cog in 3 of those championships, but while being a key cog on the first championship team, he was the 4th best player. On the next 2, he was the 5th best player. And this most recent year's championship, he was probably the 10th most important player on that team, and was playing like 2 minutes a game in the finals. And then his other final appearance that did not come to Golden State was with the Miami Heat, and he was not a big player on that team at all. He was probably fourth or fifth off the bench with Miami. Iguodala is one of those guys. He's a point forward. He can get you 6 assists a game. Great defender. Okay scorer. Can go off, for 20 in big games. I just don't think his resume stacks up to some of these other guys, even with the Finals MVP. Right now, I have Andre Iguodala not making the Hall of Fame. Next up is a teammate of Iguodala's, Draymond Green. In my eyes, Draymond Green is a lock, but I'm not sure if everybody feels the same way, so we will discuss Draymond. Draymond is a 4-time All-Star. He has 1 All-NBA second team, 1 All-NBA third team, a Defensive Player of the Year, 4 times All-Defensive first team, 3-time All-Defensive second team. Top of all of that, he is a 4-time champion, and he's been to the final 6 times and the conference final 6 times. This guy is the ultimate glue guy. He's a winner. He'll do whatever needs to be done. You could even make a case a part of that dynasty, he was the second most important piece over Clay. It's just somebody you want to have on your team and you would not want to play against. Even dating back to his college days, he's always had maybe not the athleticism or the skill, but he's had the intangibles. Being a second-round pick, it's carried over into the NBA, and all the guy does is win. So, you got to put him in the Hall of Fame. Point forward at the 4 spot. Great defender, probably a top 5-10 defender of the last 10 years. That might not even be doing it justice. He can switch really 1 through 5. Need be at times. Draymond Green is definitely a Hall of Famer. Next up is Marc Gasol. Gasol is a 3-time All-Star. He made an All-NBA first team. 2 times he was All-NBA second team. He's got a Defensive Player of the Year. He was a 1-time defensive second team player, a 1-time champion, and a 2-time conference finalist. So his resume doesn't really jump off the books at you, but he does got the championship, and he's got a DPOY, but I'm not sure if the DPOY was deserved. He wasn't even first team all defense that year. I never looked at Marc Gasol as a superstar defender. I thought he was always above average. He was good. That year he was great, but he was not the best defensive player in basketball by any means. He could put the ball in the hole. He could give you around like 16, 17 a game, like pretty efficiently. But not a great rebounder. Probably give you like 7 or 8 a game most years. Like I said, pretty good defender. Borderline great defender, but he wasn't no Draymond out there. High intangibles, high IQ, but this resume does not stack up to a Hall of Famer resume. So Marc Gasol will not be getting in the Hall of Fame. Next up is Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin is a 6-time All-Star, 3-time All-NBA second team, 2-time third team. Blake Griffin had never reached a conference finals, and that is playing with Chris Paul, DeAndre Jordan, Crawford, and Redick. That team was good enough where he probably could have made at least one or two. I'm not saying he was the only reason they didn't make it to that far, but he never overachieved from a winning standpoint. The second team selections are very impressive. You got three of them. Third team, you good. Blake Griffin was probably a top 15 player for about 5 or 6 years, but to me, he never peaked to the point where he was a bona fide superstar. He's one of those guys where it's like, was he ever really a top 10 player? Definitely a borderline superstar, not a star or superstar. So, Blake Griffin, to me, not going to get in the Hall. Uh, yeah, great player in his prime. Just, I don't think his prime lasted long enough. Started having injury issues. Had some stuff off the court. Um, the Clippers kind of did him dirty. They signed him to that contract. He went to Detroit. I don't know if when he got there he still loved basketball. I just don't think his resume is enough to get him in the Hall. Next up is DeMar DeRozan. And DeRozan, like Draymond Green, are the only people on this list to me that can really like still add to their resume being like either all-stars or borderline all-star level players. DeMar DeRozan is a six-time all-star, two-time NBA second team, one-time NBA third team, one-time conference finals with the Raptors, and he's got over 20,000 points. For the third time this video, I am bringing up how people that meet that barrier usually get in, even though I said no to LaMarcus Aldridge and ISO Joe. DeRozan, I've never seen him overachieve in the playoffs. Does not seem like he has high intangibles to me. Good scorer. Those points always drop off in the playoffs. Not a great facilitator. Not a good defender by any means. I wouldn't say he's terrible, but that guy's not ever going to make an all-defensive team or even get look for it. I would say for maybe a year or two, he was a top 15 player in the NBA, but I've always looked at him as like a top 20-25 guy. Never really reached superstar status. So, right now, I have DeRozan as a no to get in. But if this guy could, make a conference finals with Chicago or give you another year or two of all NBA level basketball, that could become a yes. So I've got DeRozan as a no now, but really it's a maybe depending on what he does. Next up is Derrick Rose. Man, what this guy's career could have been. Rose, three-time All-Star. One-time All-NBA first team. One-time Most Valuable Player. One-time Conference Finalist. We all know about Derrick Rose's injuries. Prime lasted about 2 years, peaked for a year, and he had the injuries. Great scorer, when he was the MVP, he could get teammates involved. Didn't shoot the ball basketball very well, but he did everything else great. Okay defender, not a superstar by any means, but not bad. If this guy could have gave you 2 more good years along with the MVP or like a finals appearance or a championship, I would say he gets in. But just due to having like a 2-year prime, I'm going to say Derrick Rose is not a Hall of Famer. And it's sad because if those injuries never happen, he's probably top 50 all time. Who knows what he could have been. But with this short of a resume and accomplishments, I cannot say he's a Hall of Famer. Next up is Rajon Rondo. Rondo is a 4-time All-Star, 1-time All-NBA third team, 2-time All-NBA defensive first team, 2-time All NBA defensive second team, 2-time champion, 3-time finalist, five conference finals. Let's look at the championships first. He was a key piece, a very key piece in the first one. He was the fourth best player on the loaded Boston Celtics teams, but he did his job. Played very good defense, and he got all the superstars and the role players the ball when they needed the ball, and he controlled the egos. Very good floor general. It's like having a coach on the court. And then let's get to the next championship. Didn't really provide anything throughout the regular season, not even really that much throughout the playoffs, but in the finals he stepped up and gave LeBron that third piece to really put them over the top against the Miami Heat. But the five conference finals, he I would say he played a major part in probably about 3 of those. Rondo, great passer, alright finisher, high basketball IQ, lockdown defense, terrible shooter, terrible free throw shooter. But the intangibles and the IQ, the fact he's won, to me, is enough to say Rajon Rondo just squeaks into the Hall of Fame. Next up is DeMarcus Cousins. 4-time All-Star. 2-time All-NBA second team. 2-time conference finalist. 1-time finalist. DeMarcus Cousins in his prime and peak was a complete monster. Racked up a lot of accolades individually, but he never won anything. And while he was a key piece on a team, or even a somewhat key piece, he never made the playoffs in the Western Conference. I think he gave you 28 a game a couple years, but it just seemed like they were empty stats sometimes, and then he was getting thrown out of games for technicals. He was arguing with teammates. He would argue with the coaches. Just complete another hothead. So the fact he made 2 conference finals and 1 finals is very misleading. Anyone would have made the finals on that Golden State team, and he was hurt for most of the playoffs anyway. And then the other conference finals, I think he was with maybe Denver or somebody recently, and he had a very minimal role on that team. So it's not like he was playing key minutes or had a key role. So DeMarcus Cousins is not a Hall of Famer to me, due to winning, due to injury, due to selfishness. But from a talent standpoint, he should have been. So these are the 2 guys I went a little bit back a little bit further for. This guy retired in 2014. It's Chauncey Billups. Billups is a 5-time All-Star, 1-time All-NBA second team, 2-time All-NBA third team, 2-time second defensive team, 1-time final MVP, 1-time champion, 2-time finalist, 7-time conference finalist. Chauncey Billups, to me, was a slightly better version of Kyle Lowry. Above average scorer, more clutch than Lowry. Maybe didn't facilitate as well, but they were roughly the same. Probably a slightly better defender. A leader, just high basketball IQ, high intangibles, clutch. He went to 7 conference finals. I believe they were all in a row. As the floor general all-star of these teams. He's got the final MVP. I don't know how Chauncey Billups is currently not in the Hall of Fame. I think he's been robbed so far. I think he definitely gets in.
Yeah, he's definitely a Hall of Famer to me. Like if Lowry's getting in, if Rondo's getting in, you have to put Billups in. Next up is Amari Stoudemire, a little more recent retirement. I believe it was 2017. Amari was a six-time All-Star, one-time All-NBA first team, two-time All-NBA second team, two-time conference finalist. On his two conference finals appearances, he was the second best player on these teams. But you could make a case Stoudemire was a superstar. Definitely at least a borderline superstar for 6 years in the NBA. Was the first team, 4 times second team. This guy was at worst a top 15 player for 5 or 6 years in the NBA, and maybe even top 10 for 2 to 3 years. I think Stoudemire should definitely be in the Hall of Fame. Not a first ballot guy, but he should definitely get in. Running alongside Nash, they were winning, high 50s, 60 games. Key Cog. I don't know how you would leave Amari or Billups out with their resumes. Thank you for listening, and have a good one.